A very good evening and welcome to People of Africa. My name is Siphumelele Zondi. Now, Mr. Mathatha Tsedu spent 6 years not able to practice journalism. He had been stopped by the apartheid government of South Africa from practicing this. Now, he joins us in the studio to talk a bit more about his life. Sir, hello and welcome to People of Africa.
Thank you for the invite.
Now, you describe yourself as a normal village boy. Now, what was it like in the village?
Which I am, yeah. And I'm heading there tomorrow. Village life was actually quite exciting. I was born in a township, but the apartheid regime decided to do away with freehold rights. That's the time when the Sophia towns and the District 6 were disappearing. Even our little township in Makado now also disappeared, and my father decided that we were going to go to a village away from the city. I was very angry with him because I considered myself a bit of a city slicker little boy. Didn't like looking after goats and snakes in the grass and stuff like that. But it became quite exciting just being out there, growing up there. Then my father lost his job. Life became very, very difficult. There were times when we would go for days without any food at all in the house.
Now, let's backtrack a little bit. You said you considered yourself as somewhat of a city slicker before you moved to the village. How was it when you were there for the first time? It must have been a massive culture shock.
Yeah, it was. Moreover, because my father then decided that even though we were going to live here, I was actually going to not even live there with everybody else. He was taking me to his sister's place, which was deeper in the rural areas. And the idea of spending my life walking behind goats was not something that was a good joke on me. Yeah.
And then you were a herds boy.
Yeah, I looked after these goats, and sometimes out there in the mountains with the goats, we would wrestle with the goats if they had young ones, and milk straight into the mouth. Yeah, and it was great. Fresh milk straight from the tits.
Yeah, what does it taste like?
It was great. And if the goat had the baby goat 2 days earlier or so, the milk would be different, and you could warm it up and it would coagulate into some kind of solid thing, which was also very great.
Yes, and you say that your father lost his job after some time. How were those days at home when your father wasn't working?
It was terrible. We would go for days without food in the house, but I would never go for a day without food in my stomach, because out in the village, the African spirit of Ubuntu, what people call Ubuntu today, some people call it socialism, some call it communalism, but the essence was really that you were every mother's child. Yeah, and for me, the adage that goes like, it takes a village to raise a child, I am a direct result of that village where I grew up, taking care of me. So for those days when there was nothing in the home, I would know that I would eat somewhere. Yeah.
And it must affect you, though, a little bit as a child, you know, not having food in the stomach, and when it comes to schoolwork and things like that.
Yeah, it was very difficult. You would, if you don't even have food, you won't have paraffin to do your homework and all those things. At some point, I left school because I couldn't pay 50 cents to register for the Standard 6. This was many years before you were born, I'm sure. But there was a thing called Standard 6. And in order to write the exam for Standard 6, you had to register in July. And to register, you paid 50 cents. I couldn't raise that 50 cents. So I left school and went and worked as a gardener somewhere. Yeah.
And leaving school is something that you didn't only do once, you did that several times.
Yeah.
And was it, did you have odd jobs, were they freely available to a school child?
Yeah, the gardening thing was quite easy to get because I was being exploited anyway. You know, I worked for a month and I got a rent. But with that rent, I could buy a few things, you know, like cigarettes. I still smoked at the time. and a few other things. I then left school again when I was doing Form 2, which is some grade something now. Yeah. And when I left school at that time, I became a bus conductor. It was a hell of a job too, because these were buses that were traveling in rural areas. People would go to town in the bus to go and buy a bag of millimil. Now this bag of millimil must go up there on top of the bus.
Yes.
Yeah, I had to take the thing up there and then bring it down again without it spilling. So
so what would happen should it spill?
The owner of the bag would insist that I would have to refund, buy another one, and it was reasonable. Yeah, you know. So all it meant was that I had to be sure that when I have it in my hand and I was coming down, it was in my hand and not about to fall.
But the one thing about you know, public transport drivers or even bus conductors that you must have some stories that you remember from your bus conducting days.
Yeah, a lot of people would be drinking in the bus and then they would throw up, and it would be my job to clean up. So each time I saw somebody starting to drink, I just saw this is trouble coming now. You know? Yeah.
And you went on, obviously, until you got to matric in high school, which is the senior year of high school in South Africa.
Yeah, from the money that I saved from my conducting days, I went back to school and did my junior certificate, which is another thing that you might not know about. And then I got a bursary from the Institute of Race Relations and went to a boarding school at Mpapuli High School in Sibasa. And that's where I did my matric. Wanted to be a doctor, but realized that if I had struggled so much to just do matric, this is a pipe dream. So I decided maybe I should do some other things. So I worked in a number of capacities. I worked at a hospital in the laboratory testing things, all sorts of things that come out of a human body. I would wake up in the morning and they would be sitting there from the solids to the liquids.
Just for you to test.
Yeah, and I would work on all of those things and take x-rays and help people. I remember a friend of mine who came to do he had TB, and his sputum, I tested it throughout. It was a long process, but I tested it and could identify that he had TB.
Wow.
Yeah. And
do you think it's something you can still do today?
If I put my mind to it and look at that manual again, yeah. If the need arises, yeah, I can still do it.
Okay. And then you also sold newspapers on street corners.
Yeah, I had been trying to learn to build my own transmitter so that I could broadcast like you guys do, but I wanted to broadcast revolution. So I joined the post office and they fired me. And in order to survive, I started selling newspapers. Those papers were not selling all that much in Pietersburg at the time. So I complained to the people who were writing the newspaper here in Joburg that they should put some news from the north in the paper. And they said, well, they don't have anyone there. If I think I can write the stories, I should write them and they'll publish them. So, and that's how I actually went into journalism, to try and sell more newspapers, not to do any other thing.
And that was your entry into journalism.
Yeah.
And now you know, you've grown up to be an editor and you have children as well. What goes through your mind when you look at their various successes?
I'm a Zionist, not of the khaki type. We wear the white coat and with the crosses and things. So there's some level of me that believes in God, and I just think that God used a number of people in that village to guide me through, and a number of other people throughout the period when things were very, very tough, to hold me up and make me what I am. And I see in what they did for me a responsibility on me to also be available to others who would find themselves in the situation that I found myself, that my hand should also be available, outstretched to help.
And how do you think when they look at you as a father, what do you think goes through their minds?
My kids? I hope they are proud of me. I think sometimes they get angry at me because, especially the older ones, I was never there when they were growing up. I was busy with this revolution thing, and their mother has to take all the credit for what they have become.
And your career has, as you've been explaining, hasn't really been an easy one as well. And when you reflect back now, as sitting as editor-in-chief, like working in a laboratory, working as a bus conductor, was it worth it?
I think it was, in a way, because what it has done is to broaden my mind and understanding of pain. Yeah, and to understand that whatever I may be, whatever I may have, there are people who do not have what I have. And as I was saying earlier, whatever achievement that I have made, it's because somebody out there gave me their time. Yeah, and as I sit in my desk, that's part of the challenge every day. Am I helping somebody? Besides just being concerned about producing a good newspaper that people will buy and my employers will be happy that there's money coming in, am I available at a different level? That's a subtext responsibility that runs underneath all the responsibilities that I carry as an editor. Yeah. And given my own outlook as an African, the biggest challenge for me is how do everything that I do every day, is it adding value to us as a people of this continent?
Now, Mr. Mathatha Tsedu, thank you very much for joining us on People of Africa. It certainly has been an interesting one.
No, sure, thanks.
That's Mr. Mathatha Tsedu, editor-in-chief of one of the leading newspapers in South Africa, City Press, talking to us there on People of Africa. And that's all we have for you today on People of Africa. Remember to write to us on sni@sabc.co.za. That is sni@sabc.co.za. Rendezvous Africa continues right after Today in History.